We're on Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis, and we're analyzing, as you recall, Rabbi Shimon, according to Rabbi Oshia, Bishleim, the Gemara says, which is approximately 10 lines, 12 lines up from the bottom of the Amud, Bishleim Yibem V'achakach Nolad, if the Leda, the birth of Levi, was after the Yibum, so when Levi came into the world, the facts on the ground were that the old Zika of Ruvain has now materialized into a Yibum of Shimon. So Levi comes into the picture, and Shimon is already fully married to the wife of Ruvain, Sarah. Is ki ashkechei v'tera ashke. When Levi encounters, so to speak, Sarah, the daughter of Ruvain, he finds her beheaded. In other words, the Yibum of Shimon is mafkia the ishus of Ruvain, so that even though Levi is lo hayba olamo shel Ruvain, and therefore ishto shel Ruvain should be an Ashes Ach and an Ereva to Levi, but nevertheless, when Levi comes into the world, there never was that Erev of Ashes Ach, because the ishus between Sarah and Rachel is gone, and that's replaced by the Yibum of Shimon. My time. What we don't understand is, if the birth of Levi took place before the Yibum of Shimon, so that means at the moment that Levi came into existence, there was a Zika to Ashes Ruvain, meaning to Sarah. Then I don't understand how Rabbi Shimon could allow Yibum to Ashes Sarah, because we're assuming now that at the moment that Levi is born, the Zika between Levi or Shimon, for that matter, and Ashes Reuben is still alive and well, because Shimon has not yet implemented Yibum, and that should generate an Isser of Ashes Ach. And even though Shimon subsequently marries Sarah Ashes Reuben, but nevertheless, you cannot undermine the Isser of Ashes Ach. And the Gemara answers, Kosovar. So here we are, just Steve, you came in a little bit late. We're up to Kosovar Yesh Zika, which is approximately, I would say, 12 lines up from the bottom, and the line starts with my time. But my timer, Kosovar, Rabbi Shimon holds Yesh Zika. The Zika Kiknutza Amil. In other words, although at the moment of the birth of Levi, Shimon had not yet implemented Yibum, but nevertheless the Zika was there. And that Zika is the same, so to speak, as Yibum. It's as if, for all intents and purposes, according to Rav Shimon Shita, Shimon had actually been miyabim Sarah Ashes Reuben, because that Zika between Shimon and Ashes Reuben is kiknusa dominant. And therefore, there's no difference between cases A and B, whether Levi was born after the Yibum or Levi was born before the Yibum. In both cases, it's exactly the same, because she's considered to be married, so to speak, to Shimon by virtue of the Zika, and that's mafkia the ishus of Ruvain, such that when Levi came into existence, there was no erev of Ashes Ach between Levi and Sarah Ashes Ruvain, because she, from the moment that her husband Ruvain died, was considered knusa to Shimon as a result of the Zika. Maskifla Rav Yosef raises the following objection to Rav Oshia, and he applies a Kal V'chomer. Hashta, let's take the case of the Yevamot that has not only a Zika to the Yavam, but also Maimon. The Yavam said, Hareat Mekudeshesni to the Yevamot, and he gave a kesef or shtar. And Mesafkale the Rabbi Shimon, as we're going to soon prove, Rabbi Shimon vacillated, Ikiknusa dami, Ilavke knusa dami. So even if you add Zika plus Maimar, we're still not sure if she's Kiknusa, and Rabbi Shimon vacillates about that and considers it a suffix. Is Zika lechudei mipai? How much more so if there was no Maimar, there was just Zika. And Rabbi Shimon would now be in a doubt as to whether or not the Zika creates a din of Knusa. So how could you be Matir Levi to be Miyabim H's Ruvain, according to Rabbi Shimon, who has a tzad to say that she's not Kiknusa Dami? Rabbi Shimon did not commit himself in an absolute certain way to the position that Zika is Kiknusa Dami. Maihi, so the Gemara wants to know, Rav Yosef, how do you know, where did you derive this conclusion that Rav Shimon vacillates about the status of Zika, whether or not it's Kiknusa or Lav Kiknusa David? This nan, because we have a Mishnah later on Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Beis, and now we have three brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Shlosha Achim, Nesuim, L'Sholosh Nashim Nochnas, the three different wives, and they're not related to each other. They're not sisters. So let's say Reuben marries Sarah, Shimon marries Rivka, Levi marries Rachel. Umeisa Echad Mihem, let's assume that Reuben died childless. The Asaba Hasheni, Sheni we call Shimon. Let's say Shimon did a Maimar, Umes. So now Shimon has a wife, Rivka, and he did Maimar after Sarah, his brother Reuven died, Umes, and then Shimon died without children. So Shimon never actually consummated the Yibum. All he did was Maimar. And again, Shimon has another wife, we called her Rivka. So now both Sarah and Rivka fall for Yibum to Levi. Again, this is Eishes Aksha Hayabolomo. We're not talking about Eishes Aksha Lo Hayabolomo. Is Hare Elu. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you have a photocopy of this page, right? With the diagram? Now you don't have it with you? I think this was the page. No, maybe it was the diagram on the previous page. Anyway, I'll just read it to you. It's very straightforward. We're talking about, in case of Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are brothers. Reuven marries Sarah, Shimon marries Rivka, Levi marries Rachel. Reuven dies without children, and his wife Sarah falls for Yibum to Shimon. Shimon does a Maimar to Sarah Eishes Reuven, and then he dies. Meiskam Shimon below Banu. Lifnei shehispik liyabim is Sarah. Nafla gam Rachel, gam Rivka, Lifnei Levi liyibum. That the Mishnah says now, Hare elu choltos v'lo misyavos. The status of both Sarah and Rivka, who are now, in some sense, both wives of Shimon, then Shimon dies, is equal. And with regard to both of them, choltos v'lo misyavos. There's no possibility of evil. This is the Shita of the Rabbanon. We'll soon see that Rabbi Shimon is going to disagree, and he's going to allow Yibum. But the Rabbanon do not allow Yibum. And this is called Eshes Shnei Mason. Meaning, there are two different brothers married to two different wives that send each one, respectively, their wives to Yibum, in this case to Levi. So Levi is now looking at Eshes Reuven and at Eshes Shimon. Eshes Reuven meaning Sarah, and Eshes Shimon Rivka. He says here in the footnote, again, I'm going to try to read it out loud. It's just a little bit small. It says, Hare l'Rabbanon, shtein cholzos lo misyabos. Okay, so he explains it here. Had Shimon gone ahead with Yibum before he died, with Eshes, Ruvain, Sarah, Haisa nifkas mimenu zikas Ruvain. Benases Eshes Shimon l'chol dom. Haisa ofeles mimenu liyibum l'fnei lev. And that would be a simple case where a man is married to two wives, he dies, and Levi, let's say the surviving brother, will decide which one he wants to be miyabim, which ones he wants to be cholot. This would also be simple. Had Shimon not do the mime, Hoisa tachas likas Ruvain benofeles mimenu Levi. So Sarah would fall for Yibum to Levi. And once again, I'm just filling in the blanks here. Levi, the ball's in his court. He could decide which of these two he would want to be miyabim. That's because Shimon did not do a maimar. Rachel Eshes Ruvain falls to Yibum to Levi, and Rivka Eshes Shimon falls to Yibum to Levi. Yeah. Oh, we have to see if he could be miyabim both of them. That could be. We'll have to wait till we get to the next year. Anyway, so he says no. What happened here? Again, let's go over very quickly. If Shimon would have been miyabim her, clearly Rachel would fall for Yibum from Shimon to Levi, as would Rivka. Then let Levi take his choice. Had Shimon not done maimar, then Rachel Eshes Ruvain would fall directly to Levi. And there's no problem with that Yibum. However, Shimon did a maimar. Now, maimar, we said over and over again, is a kinyan d'Rabbanan. Because in the case of Yibum, the Torah only recognizes one method of kinyan, and that's beer. So the level of kinyan now between Shimon and Eshes Ruvain is that of a d'Rabbanan. We'll call it a mixas kinyan. Yesh ba'adayin gam zikas Ruvain. Because since Shimon has not yet been miyabim Eshes Ruvain, there's still a zika to Ruvain. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know if I used the right terminology. Did I call this Eshes Shnei Mesim? I don't know. In other words, what's propelling Sarah to Yibum to Levi? On the one hand, if on a Doraisa level we're not going to recognize the validity of Maimar, then Ruvain is projecting Yibum to Levi in the case of Sarah, as well as Shimon being projecting Rivka. But on the other hand, Midrabbana, we recognize the validity of what? Of Maimar. So, we're being posech al shtei seifim here. We're riding on two different camels over here, because if we assume that the Maimar is nothing on a Doraisa level, then Ruvain is the one who's projecting, what's her name? Sorry. If on the other hand, we, on a D'Rabbanan level, validate Maimar, then it's Shimon who's projecting Sarah for Yibum to Levi. Harezu ke'eshes shnei mesim, shinofeles liyibum l'fnei Levi machma shneim. So again, we're defining the chalos, the power, the legal power of Maimar as a halfway measure. We're going to see that Reb Shimon is going to reject it. It's either this or it's either that. But the Tanakama maintains that it's right down the middle. It's but it's not It's a miktas kinyan. And because it's a miktas kinyan, there's also an element of Zikas Ruvain in the picture, not just Zikas Shimon who did the Maimar. The Imnafla Liyibum Yachan and Rivka Tzaras Eishes Shimon, Minat Torah, Yesh Lo Liyamim Eshtayan. Shrei Kol Achas Men Nofel Slo Me'ach Ach. Now, if I understand his language, he's saying he actually could be miyavim both of them. So Levi, in the case where Reuven, his brother, died and left Sarah, and Shimon died and left Rivka, then Levi could be miyavim theoretically both Sarah and Rivka. Shrei Kol Achas Men Nofel Eslo Me'ach Acher Avo Osru Chachamim Liyamim Eshtayan Mishum Gzeira. What's the Gzeira? Shemeyoru she'af shtei yevamos hanoflos mibayis or mi'ach echad shtein misyabmos. Yet it looks very suspicious, very similar to a case of one brother who's married to two women and he dies. And the halacha is that the Yavam, the surviving brother, can only be miyavim one of these two women. And here also, it looks like she's falling for Yibum from Shimon, together with Rivka, right? Sarah and Rivka together, and he's been miyavim both of them, and they're both Eishes Shimon, because Shimon did a maimah. And therefore, it looks very similar to Shtei Yevamas Hanoflos Mibayis Ech, where he can only do even to one of them. V'smichu divreim al mashenemar umeis echad mehem uvein elo lo sia eishes hames achutz litzar Yevama yavo aleh. So the pasuk says umeis echad mehem. What conclusion are we going to derive from that pasuk umeis echad mehem? That there's no mitzvah of yibum unless it's misha yesh oleh zikas yavam echad below sheyesh oleh zikas shnei yavamim. So it's one woman who has a zika from two different yavamim. Why? Because Reuven died, right? Reuven died. So that's one zika. That's a zika from Reuven. And that same Sarah has a zika from Shimon. Now, how could that be? If Shimon was miyavim her, then there's only one zika. But our case is that Shimon gave her maimah. And on the Rabbanan level, we recognize that maimah. And therefore, we have to consider it as if the Yibum came through Shimon. But on the other hand, it's not a full-fledged Yibum, a full-fledged Kenyan, and therefore the Yibum comes through Reuven. So this one woman is an Eisha Shnei Mason. You see, I don't know what is the Doraisa case. Maybe he'll tell me, or maybe you have it in one of your notes. But our case is So the bottom line is that according to the Chachamim, in the case where Shimon did a maimar with Ashes Ruvain Sarah, then both of these women look like Ashes Shnei Yevamim, one woman who's coming from two different Yevamim, and therefore we cannot allow Yibum. Because the Torah says that there's no mitzvah Yibum unless there's Zikas Yavam Echad, but not Yeshal Zikas Shnei Yevamim. In this case, it looks like Zikas Shnei Yevamim as a result of the Maimar. So again, had there not been a Maimar, then there would be no problem with Yibum. And Levi would decide which of these two women he wants to be Miyabin. And in fact, we said he could be Miyabin both of them, because one comes through Ruvain and the other comes through Shimon. Now, had Shimon done nothing, no mimer at all, so then there would be a Zika to Rocha, to what do we call her, Sarah, through Ruvain and only through Ruvain, and she would fall for Yibum to Levi. And then, if Shimon would have implemented the Yibum during his lifetime, then once again, he would have left two wives, and Levi could be Miyabim either one of those two wives. But now that Shimon did a Maimar, so it looks like a case of Zika Shnei Yevamim. And that Zika Shnei Yevamim is based on the fact that in Rabbanan we recognize the kinyan of Maimar, and therefore she is, meaning, I always call her Rachel, but here it's called Sarah. I get that mistake. Sarah is coming not only through Ruvain, because we're going to nix and discount the Maimar on a Doraisa level, but since we're Rabbanan, she's married to Shimon, now she's got a Zika on a Doraisa level through Ruvain and a Zika on a Rabbanan level through Shimon. And that makes her into Esha Shnei Yevamim. Zika Shnei Yevamim. So if you have two different women that are coming from two different Achim, no problem. You could be Miyabim, both of them. But if you have a situation where one woman is coming through two Achim, that is excluded from the mitzvah of Yibum by virtue of a posel. And our situation, because of the mimer of Shimon to Sarah, looks like Eshes Zika Shnei Yevamim. Rav Shimon Omer Miyabim Leizim Em Sheyirtza V'Choletz Lashniya. Now let's understand. We're going to apply the Mimonevchach logic of Rabbi Shimon. How do we view this? If we view this as the Maimar, as a Kinyan, Sofiku ha'im nechsheves Sarah. Im nechsheves Sarah. He calls her Bailas Hamamor. Okay, that's a new phrase. I never saw that before. Bailas Hamamor. No, it's the recipient of the Maimer. Le'esha Shimon. Then Shimon has two wives. He cannot be miyabim both, right? If, on the other hand, we say that Shimon's mimer is nothing, then he can miyabim both of them. So therefore, Rav Shimon says, Miyavim le'ezim and sheyirtze. He can't be Miyavim both of them because of the tzad that Shimon's mimer is actually a kinyan. Let's see how the Gemara says it. Yibume travayu lo. We're not going to be mativ for Levi to be Miyavim both wives. That means Sarah and Rivka. To Dilma yesh zika. Second. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Right. You see, Maimar here only plays a secondary role. What the Mishnah is trying to emphasize is that Rabbi Shimon's suffix applies not only to Zika per se, but even if the Zika was upgraded to the level of Maimar, and even after all is said and done, there was both Zika and Maimar, still Rabbi Shimon is going to consider that the Zika is nothing and the Maimar is nothing. And on a Deraisa level, therefore, both these women fall for Yibum from two different brothers. But Dilma Yesh Zika, but since Rabbi Shimon vacillates about this question, and he has it sad to say that Yesh Zika, then we're saying, and how much more so together with Shimon's Maimar, but even without Shimon's Maimar, Shimon, as far as Rachel is concerned, she's a knusa. And the kinyan is a complete kinyan, which would mean that we have a situation of zikas shnei yevamot. No. Sorry. If we would consider the kinyan to be a valid kinyan, and if zika is kiknutza, then it's a zikas yavam echad. So they both need yibum, correct? What's the issue? Vayushtei Yevamos, both Ibayis Echad. It means that Shimon has two wives, and he can't be Miyabim both of them. Okay, but he can choose one of them. And if on the other hand, Lav Zika, second. Oh, that's what the Gemara says here on the top of your Testament out. Yibume chada v'iftur idach. So if we've recognized Zika as kiknusa, meaning that both Sarah and Rivka are married to Shimon, then he has a choice of one of them. Okay. However, why can't he marry both of them? Just 1 second. No. What I mean to say is the following. The question is, on the tzad that Zika is kiyibum, is kiknusa, Zika is kiknusa, then only one of them needs yibum. Whichever one he chooses, the other one doesn't even need chalitza.
That's the whole point.
The buma chadavi iftar either let the other one go away scot-free without chalitza. Oh, that's also impossible. Why did Dilma ein zika kiknusa? Okay, if ein zika kiknusa, then both are falling from two different brothers. Shnei batim, and each one needs yibum and chalitza. So we can't assume that they're both married to Shimon, and therefore yibum of one of them will part to the other one. The Dilma ain't Zika kiknusa. And again, the Mishnah adds another chiddush that even though it's Zika plus Maimer, still nothing doing here. Shimon has no bias, he has no kinyan over Rachel. I'm sorry, over Sarah. I call her Rachel, you know. The Hamalu Shtei Yevamos Habos Mishnei Batim. Each one needs Yibum or Chalitza. Therefore, Rabbi Shimon concludes he can choose one of them for Yibum, and the other one's going to need Chalitza. If we would have gone straight with Ados with Zika Knutza, then he could have. 1 second. If he would have said Lav Knutza, right? Lav ain't Zika Knutza, then he could be Miyab in both of them. He can't be Miyab in both of them because perhaps Zika Knutza. But yet, he has to worry about Zika Lav Knutza, and therefore they both need Yibum or Chalitza. Okay. Alma says Rabbi Yosef, we see clearly, Misafkale, Rabbi Shimon has a suffix. Do we consider Sarah as Knusa l'Shimon or not? And that's in a case where it was both Zika and Maimon. We're still not sure, Rabbi Shimon's not sure that it's Kiknus. How much more so if it's just Zika? You cannot consider a Kiknusa b'vados. You have to be concerned about that possibility, but it's not vad. So now we have to swing back to our case. What's our case? Our case is that Shimon was born after Reuven's death, before the Yibum of Shimon. Okay, that's called Nolad V'Yachkach Yibum, and Rabbi Shimon allows Yibum in that case, even though the Yibum came after the lady. Now let's just think. If you would have said Bivados, that Zika's Kiknusa, then the Ishus to Reuven was Mufka from the moment he died, because it was a Zika to Shimon. But now we see, says Rabbi Yosef, that Rabbi Shimon was not sure about it. And he had a time to say that Zika is Lav Kiknusa Dami. And if it's Lav Kiknusa Dami, then the moment that Levi is born, he's looking at Ashes Reuben. And since he's Achiv Shalai B'Olam, he's looking at an Ashes Ak. How is it possible for Rav Shimon to allow Yibum here to Sarah?
And this is where Shimon is not doing mine.
I think, but I mean, we can go back to the Mishnah. I don't think the Mishnah mentioned the word Maimar, if I remember correctly.
Oh no, it does say.
Oh, Shimon did perform Maimar. Well, the Reish actually, which is Nolad Sof Yavam, that's the case of Reb Shimon. That's the Koch of Reb Shimon. There it doesn't mention. Now Yosef offers an answer which he rejects, but he came a midoraisa hachinami imiyabma chada umiftere chada mirabanan hudi asur. Now wait a second. This v'chitema is referring to what? It's referring to the Mishnah on Lamed Aleph that we just quoted. See, and if you say the midaraisa, I mean to be yabmachad umifterachada. So now I think he's throwing out the possibility, which he's going to attack, that Zika Kiknusa Dami B'Torah's Vada. Achas Misyabemes Pashnia Nifteres Legamre. Just 1 second. What was Rav Shimon here? Miyabim le'ezim en sheyirtze v'choletz l'shniya. So what does he mean? Ha'achas misyabemes v'ashniya nifteres l'gam. Let's see, if we apply the svara of Zika Kiknusa, let's say B'Torah's Vada, then we know that Shimon is married to both these ladies, correct? And let's assume it's B'Torah's Vada. So all he needs is one chalitza or one yibum and get ended. Okay. So why then does Rav Shimon require one yibum and one chalitza? B'Rabbanan hu dios. In other words, if he's miyabim one of them, the other one needs chalitza b'Rabbanan. And why is that? If he sheshimon adayin lo yibem esara eshes ruvain el raks kukehi lo rehe niros kibos mishnei bat. That apparently would not apply in the case of Levi Shalochaybo. You would never say, why is this near a Kishnei Bat? Second. If Shimon Adayin Lo Yibem Esara, correct? That was also the case of Nolad Lubaso. I'm going to assume, for the time being, maybe I'll be disproven that there's no chash of Eshes Shnei Batim in a case where it was Miyamim. But we're talking in the Mishnah here about a case where Shimon died without Yibum, correct? Mm-hmm. Whereas the case of Reb Shimon in our Mishnah is where Shimon ultimately was Yabim, albeit after Levi was born. What are we gaining by that? If Shimon was actually Yabim, and then he died. So in the view of the spectator, these two women, Sarah and Rivka, coming from Shimon, not from two different Yavam. But in the case of the Mishnah Lamed Aleph, there Shimon died without Yibum, although he did do Maimer, but without Yibum, and therefore it looks like Shnei Bat, right? Yavama Achas Mishnei Bat. Even though you have to admit that in our case, in our Mishnah, there was a moment of time where if you were to define or classify sorrow, you'd have to say, Batim. Second, Shimon actually implemented his own. He said to Zika. Right. On a Deraisa level, there's Rabbanon. It looks like she's coming from two different Yerubimim. After all, she was married to Reuven. This is complicated. Rabbanon hu di osur l'shniya. Because again, we're holding now B'Torah Spadai that Zika Kiknusa Dami. Therefore, Shimon is leaving two wives. That's on a Deraisa. Clear and smooth sailing. But the Rabbanan, since Shimon was not actualized evil, it looks like right? You might say that in Rabbanan, it looks like what? Like Shtei Batim. Hey, Niros Kibos Mishnei Batim.
The other one is released. Get confused when it's actually Shtei Batim. That only has to do even with one, and the other one doesn't. Shtei Batim, they only did even with one, and the other one did the
When in fact, what the other one needs chalitza?
or evil because they're two separate houses. Really, the Shtei Batim. It looks they're gonna get confused, and okay, you did this.
It looks like Shnei Batim because they don't. The spectator doesn't recognize that Zika is Kiknus.
Right.
So in his mind, Rachel is falling for Yibum from Reuven, and Rivka is falling for Yibum from Shimon. So we can't allow. So even though Rabbi Shimon is Vadai in his view that she's Kiknusa, and therefore the other one doesn't need Chalitza, one Yibum will suffice, but we need another Chalitza to quiet down the spectator who doesn't recognize that Zika is Kiknusa, and therefore believes that she's coming from a different bias, when in fact she's really coming from one bias, from Shimon. Correct?
So when the real case comes and it's from two, I think they're gonna get confused and think, oh, it means you one with one and the other one and
right. I don't know why anyone would think that, but yeah, okay. So Zera Mishum Shema Yomru, Shtei Yevamos Bos Mishnei Batim, Chadav Miyavma, Beidach Miftara Bivalot Klum. Why would they say something? That seems like such ignorance, like it's only a total.
well, because it's really just a subtle difference than the case that we have.
No, but I'm asking if two brothers, each one is married, they could die 100 years apart. I mean, why would you think that there's any interconnection between the two? Just because it's the same Yavam? I'm not. Okay, but maybe that's just my problem. Maybe it's it's not an issue at all. He says Yavo liftar sashnia below chalitza after makom shalom niskika eishes arishon olam. He go b'makom shemesu. Oh! Listen to this. He adds a piece here. Where did he get this from? I'm not sure who he's quoting, honestly. Maybe it's Rashi. He gone b'makom. Listen to this. Shemesu Ruven v'Shimon b'vasachas. I don't know if he means they died in an accident or something. Sha'az noflos Sarah v'Rivka l'fnei Levi mishnei batim u'lekuliyam shtein chayovas b'yibum v'chalitza v'yein ha'achas nifteres al yad chavertim. Okay, I'm not sure the psychology. There's a whole. You could write a psychology text here. But the bottom line is that in certain scenarios, it looks like it's episode like one nefila and let him do yibum or chalitza chooses, pick and choose, and that's all he needs. Okay, but that's more, I think, at this point psychological. I mean, I'm sure there's more. It's deeper than that, but so again, so what are we saying now? There's a piece of the puzzle missing because even though Rav Yosef is going to reject this v'chitema, but the v'chitema has to stand on its own 2 feet as an independent entity. So let's just think how that would answer our question against Rav Moshe about a case of nolad v'achakach yimeh. That in that case we go straight away with Zika kiknusa. But why is it no Xer Drapan? Let me just think this again. When do we the spectator know that Zika kiknusa? Let's get into the mindset of the spectator. Ruvain dies, leaves Sarah. Levi is born. And we're holding now that in the mind of the spectators, Zika's lav kiknusa. Yes, why wouldn't Xer Drapan apply here as well? In other words, people would say, right? Because again, what was Rav Shimon's psak? Let's go over it one more time. Is Rata, what's it? The right page. Am I looking in the right place here? Shimon Omer Miyavim Leisimish. So, am I missing something here? One second. That's how I'm reading. Am I misreading anything?
Because Levi is low.
Lo hay bolomo of Ruvain.
Right. It's explicit that she cannot fall to Hebrew from Ruvain to Levi.
Right.
Nobody questions that. So if she falls to him, it had to be coming from Shimon. So the other one would be Potter from Lisa.
And the only reason she needs Talitz is because of Zika Kiknusa.
Right. But
so the spectator doesn't know that Zika's is coming.
But he does know.
Then Adarab, according to that, her status is that of an Erev Vacious. Just 1 second. Yeah, well, maybe I could ask you a different question. The pitcher has a few different balls to pitch. So let me pitch a different ball. How are we going to allow Richard is Yibum to Rachel, to Sarah, if the spectator, again, let me just put this in my mind. The spectator thinks, the spectator thinks she's spacious roommate. How is he being out? She's an Erev of Achosish.
But he.
Because love kicks right in the mind of the spectator. Right, that's what we're saying now.
Right, but because if she falls even to Levi, it could only have been through Shimon. It couldn't have been through Ruvain because they know that's explicit. Or that,
Oh, so they're going to know that Zika is confused.
I mean, it's the only way it could happen.
It's very interesting because ask the spectator whether Zika concludes it, and in one set of circumstances he comes to one conclusion, in another scenario he comes to different. I mean, he's not allowed it enough to be consistent.
Right. I mean, in the one case he said, "What? How is Levi marrying Sarah? He was born
After Reuben
died. Torah says he can't marry her, so he must not be doing it through Reuben, and has to come in somehow through Shimon. So he's going to recognize that when they're all three alive at the same time, he doesn't have that one that busses that out and says, no, it's out of the park now. We can't. There's a possibility.
Right. And if it's a drabana and on a derice level kikusadami, then we could justify why Reb Shimon requires a litza to the other wife, because they don't realize that Zika is kikusadami, and they therefore think that she is, but we said it was, one second, Masechet Yevamot, both Mishnei Batim. And why is Kishnei Batim? Because they think that Zika is Lavki Knusadami, and therefore, how could she go out without a get? The answer is because two brothers were married to two wives, and you only have to give even to one in the mind of the spectator. So now, Rav Yosef rejects this v'chitema. Let's see why. We did a good job, I think, to present it as something cogent. Haima de Rabbi Shimon, Bishum Maimon. Okay, now we throw in Maimon into this. Again, Shimon says that he's not allowed to be miyabim both of them, correct? What was Reb Shimon? He said, miyabim li'ezo mehen sheyirtza, correct? But he didn't have the option of being miyabim both of them, and that's because of Zika kiknusa. Right, is because of Zika. 1 second. We thought it was because of Zika Kiknusa, but now when we read Reb Shimon carefully, we have to introduce another element to the equation, and that's Maimon. Correct? So in other words, the only reason why he cannot be miyabim both Sarah and Rivka is because one's Maimon, not because of Shimon's Zika. Or Zika itself is enough, but yet we have to introduce Maimer into the equation. Maimer v'lav Maimer. I guess that's the suffix of Rav Shimon about Maimer. So meaning, oh wait, I lost the cheshbon here. So where are we holding now? We're holding now with what? With Rav Yotze? What? 1 second. Where's Rav Yosef started? On Maskit Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef started back on Yud Chesam and Beis. and Hashta Zika Umaima Misafka later of Shimon Ikiknusa Dami Lav Zika Lechuda Mi Boy. Certainly, there should be a suffix. If there's a suffix about it, then we have to consider what possibility that it's not confused from. So how could he allow Yibum to Rachel on the side of Lav? Because even in the case of Maimon, Rabbi Shimon was still in doubt that maybe Lav Nusadami, and that's why what? That's why he doesn't allow Yibu. So wait a minute. Somehow, I think the exclusion of this whole shtickle Torah about, Midaraisa this, but Midarabbanan we're worried. That's all, according to Rav Yosef's logic, that's all in the case of Maimer, but in the case of Zika without Maimer, then apparently Rabbi Shimon would have allowed both of them to be, and both would require Yibum. No, but I mean, say the option is for him to be miyabim both of them. And why? Because no. This doesn't make any sense. He doesn't have the option to be miyabim both of them because of Zika Knusadam, which means that they both come from Shimon, so he can't be miyabim both. But yet, both of them need chalitza. And why is that? Because we're holding now that Zika is lav kiknusami, and therefore she's coming from what's his name? From Reuven, right? So Sarah is coming through Reuven. So what's bothering Rav Yosef here? The time of the Rabbi Shimon is Mishum Zik, Mishum Maimon. Okay. The Sanya, Omolahem Rabbi Shimon Lechachamim, Imamaro Shel Sheni Maimar is Eshes Hasheni Uboel. Imamaro Shel Sheni Eno Mamar Eshes Harishon Uboel. And this was the argument of Reb Shimon against the Chacham. What was the sheet of the Chachamim? Let's just remind ourselves. Choltos velomis yavim. So Yibum was excluded by the Rabbanan, and Reb Shimon says Mimanavshach, Yibum should be an option. Why? Because if the Maimar of Shimon was a Maimar, then he's now being miyabim Eshes Shimon. And if the Maimar of Shimon is not a Maimar, then he's being miyabim Eshes Reuven. But Mimanashach, he should be able to be miyabim what's her name? Sarah. So it can't be that can't be that Reb Shimon is based on Zika alone. Even though, again, the logic of the Kal V'chomer here, of the Mimarshach, of Rabbi Shimon would be equally valid in Zika, but yet you see from the way he attacks the Rabbanan that his Mimarshach is on Maimah. In other words, the reason why we might consider Rachel to be Eshes Shimon is because of Maimah. Had Shimon not done a Maimah, then it seems that she would be Eshes Ruvain, and she's not considered Knusa L'Shimon based on Zika alone. So it seems like what bothers Rabbi Yosef is this Taima to Reb Shimon Mishum Maimah, because those are the words in the mouth of Reb Shimon when he counters or encounters the Chachamim based on the Maimer, and he says Mimarashach on the Maimer. So what would have been without Maimer? Imlo Asa Shimon Maimer, then Harei Hi Bevadai Eshes Ruven. She would definitely be Eshes Ruven. And if she would be Eshes Ruven, then she's not considered Knusa to Shimon. Zika alone would not make her Knusa to Shimon. And therefore what? And therefore there should be no option of Yibum to Sarah. Is that correct? Because as far as Sarah is concerned, if she's not Eshes Shimon, she's Eshes Reuben, and then it's an Eshes Ach situation because of Lo Haybo Lamachas. So how could Reb Shimon allow Yibum to Sarah unless Knusa, and yet we see that the whole thrust of Reb Shimon's argument against the Chachamim that she's Knusa is because of the Maimon. That's what I think. That's what I think he's asking. All right, so we'll stop here with Omalei Abaye. But again, we're not out in the clear here. You know, like this is quite a challenge. It goes on and on. Somehow over the weekend, quite some time to review this. So again, where's Omalei Abaye? Which we'll pick up on Yom Rishonim Mirza Hashem. It's about 10 lines down. Middle of the top section, the narrow section. Okay. Put this away.